of activities. Thank you.
7 in the morning. She'll talk to me any time of the day. She's terrific. He says she's really the one who runs this show. But she's very good. I mean,
Well, that's good.
All my friends, they say, how do you see him? He says, I never get past Beatrice. I said, great week.
Lee Rabbi. Oh.
I took your advice. I asked Rachel.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. This.
They stayed together today.
Did you ever meet him? Did you ever meet Carlos Magoya? I knew him when I was starting to practice law. He was a banker at Southeast Bank. He was on the platform where all the first young lenders were. And we became friends, I think, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And we've been friends ever since. He evolved to the presidency of Southeast Bank. He then retired, and then he became the CEO for Jackson. And he runs the biggest health system in the state of Florida. Nice guy. Daniel will be at Global Forum. He's going to be the president of the AJC College Global Board. Did he ever send you this project at Brown? He had a project called Urban Art for the Blind. And he had the lieutenant governor, the mayor of Providence, the congressman, the president of Brown. Well,
I go to Diane Krieger. Her husband is a
I know.
neurologist, you know.
I know.
And,
Bruce Foreman.
yeah. I'm not too happy about the whole thing, but
She has a horrible bedside manner.
yes.
You know, I've always had the theory. I'd rather have the science
Than the bedside manner.
than the bedside manner, right?
I believe the same thing, except when it's not something like surgery. I don't care who. If I'm gonna have, I want the best there is.
Where is your, if it's not too embarrassing, where do you have your part that's on your body?
Oh, right here.
On your arm, on your shoulder?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I don't even have to touch it or do anything. It just automatically picks it up like Bluetooth.
So, and you leave it on when you shower?
And you take it off, you lose it.
Huh?
It lasts 14 days.
What does it do?
What do you mean?
It
last?
registers your
What lasts
your,
for 2 days?
all day long, constantly. What?
What do you mean lasts for 2 days?
14 days.
14 days.
Yeah, then it runs out. Then the sensor loses the ability to receive.
And then you have to get a new one?
Well, when you renew a prescription.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. How are you? Are we getting the feedback? I'll turn this off for now. Here we go. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat V'ritol Vesham Shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berit olam Beini uvein v'nei Yisrael Oti leolam, oti leolam V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Gasod et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai Es ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berit olam Uvayom hashvi Shabbat v'nafash Shabbat v'nafash Shabbat v'inafash V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei pari hagafen Amen L'chaim. Okay, blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Yeah, I don't know. It's really bizarre. I think it's just, we can't win. So, last, you know what we decided? We won't use this one. It's this. And then we'll just use... none of them work. They're all on. Test, 1, 2. What a piece of junk. Yeah. I don't think... I don't know. This one's off, yeah. I don't think it's that. I'm the guy to come fix it during the Test 1 2 test 1 2 test 1 2. Okay, so we're having all kinds of trouble. That one's better. Test 1 2 test 1 2. Okay. They all work. It's just there's feedback. Okay, so this should do it. Maybe we only need one. I hope at home you can hear me. So we are now in the Torah portion of Vayetze, and what we're dealing with is the Jacob now getting tricked into marrying first Leah and then Rachel. If you were here last night, I was talking a little bit about it and said, well, maybe he wasn't tricked. Maybe he was supposed to marry Leah, because once he bought the birthright, or once he stole the birthright, it was a two-part process, right? The first is he bought it from Esau. Remember, he said, give me some food to eat, and he said, I'll only give it to you if you sell me your birthright. So he bought it. And then He stole the blessing which punctuated it when he dressed up as Esau. But maybe he was dressed up as Esau because he was Esau. Why? Because he bought the birthright. So he is the older brother now. So when he marries Leah first, maybe that's what it's supposed to be. Because the older brother was supposed to marry the older sister. And that's why Leah was always crying all the time. And the Torah says she has soft eyes, according to Rashi, because she was upset that she was destined to marry Esau. Well, okay, so whatever. Last week I had a wedding, and the bride's name was Rachel, which is so much fun. Because you can say to the groom, are you sure it's not Leah? Which I always do whenever I have the fortune to marry. And so if you have a bride and groom who are actually somewhat familiar with Torah, which is an assumption you should never make, because, he might be, what do you mean, who's Leah? What are you talking about? It's a joke. Okay, so fortunately, this couple was familiar with the Torah. Yeah, well, that was it. Who is it? So we see that he marries Leah first, and then he had to work 7 years just for her. So he says, fine, he loves Rachel so much, he's going to work another 7 years. Fine. We get that. He's there for 14 years. But why does he end up working for another 6, 7 years after that? Why doesn't he just leave so Jacob marries Leah. Fine, he worked 7 years. Now he marries Rachel, works another 7 years. Fine, he marries her. And then he can leave whenever he wants. What is that? Yeah. It's a wonderful time, for that. Why does he work another 7 years and then all of a sudden say to Laban, I'm out of here? Why not marry Rachel and say, I'm out of here? So what I want to look at today is when and why does Jacob decide to go back to Israel? You see the issue? And if you can figure that out, you can learn a lot. In fact, I might even suggest that you can't understand Zionism. You can't understand Zionism today if you don't understand this issue. Or at least, let's fine-tune it. You can't understand the theological underpinnings of Zionism today without understanding this issue. And if you don't think theology plays a role in Zionism, take a look at the pictures today of who's in the coalition. Right? There's some very, very Orthodox people in the coalition. Why are they in the coalition? Because they have large voting groups who believe in some of this stuff. Okay? So this is part of it. This is part of it. Okay. So let's begin chapter 29 of Genesis, verse 1. Chapter 29, verse 1. We're in the Torah portion called Vayetze. Now, just to point out, okay, ready? Here we go. Norman, chapter 29, verse 1 of Genesis. Can you use the mic with it on? I'll turn mine off.
Jacob then moved on and headed for the land of the people of Kedem. He looked, and lo, a well in the field with 3 flocks of sheep lying at rest by it, because this was the well from which they watered the flocks. A good-sized rock lay on the mouth of the well.
You know what? We don't need 29.
When Rachel saw? When Rachel saw that she was not bearing children to Jacob, Rachel came to envy her sister. She said to Jacob, "Let me have children, otherwise I am a dead woman." Jacob grew angry with Rachel and said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" But she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Couple with her and let her give birth on my knees so that I too may have a son through her." So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob coupled with her. Bilhah became pregnant and bore a son to Jacob. Rachel said, "God has judged me and has also listened to my plea and given me a son." She therefore named him Dan. Again, Rachel's maid Bilhah became pregnant. She bore a second son to Jacob. Rachel then said, "A mighty rivalry have I waged with my sister. Moreover, I have prevailed." She therefore named him Naphtali.
So you see that Rachel is giving the names to the children that are born through Bilhah. Because, the Midrash says Bilhah said, he looks like Joe. He looks like a Joe. And Rachel said, it's more like a Don. That's what the Midrash says. You can take it or leave it. Okay. There's a joke. Verse 9.
When Leah saw that she was no longer bearing children, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore a son to Jacob. Leah said, "Fortune has come." She therefore named him God.
Right. So how happy is this home at this point? Right. So how are Leah and Rachel getting along? Everyone hates Jacob. The maid servants are like, "What do we chop liver?" I mean, how joyous is this home right now? Just based on what we saw. Okay.
And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore a second son to Jacob. Leah then said, "How happy I am. Yes, women will call me happy." She therefore named him Asher. In the time of the
Sort of rubbing it in, by the way.
in the time
I'm doing great. How you doing? Right. Okay.
in the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben went out and found mandrakes in the field. When he brought them to his mother Leah, Rachel said to Leah, "Pray give me some of your son's mandrakes." She replied, "Isn't it enough that you took my husband and now you want to take my son's mandrakes?" And Rachel said, "Very well, let him sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes."
So we did the class with the mandrakes. I don't know if we did it last year or a couple years ago. We have that. You know that story already. I don't want to focus on that. It's fascinating, but we did that class, and it's a whole nother class. I want to focus on something else. The mandrakes have to do with like an aphrodisiac in terms of getting people pregnant and stuff. We did all that. But there's a really other interesting direction I want to go today. Verse 16.
When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "I am the one you will bed tonight, for I have bought you with my son's mandrakes." That night he slept with her, and God now listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore a fifth son to Jacob. Leah said, "God has given me my reward for giving my maid to my husband." She therefore named him Issachar. Again Leah became pregnant, and she bore a sixth son to Jacob. Leah then said, "God has given me a fine gift. Now my husband will finally give me the wedding gift due me, for I have borne him 6 sons." She therefore named him Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and named her Dinah.
Okay. I remember a joke once. I heard some rabbi tell this joke. He said, it says in the Torah when Jacob finally meets Esau, and he says, "In Lavan garti," with Lavan I've been living. And the rabbis are amazed by the word garti, because if you add up the numerical value of the word garti, it comes out to 613, which is the amount of mitzvahs in the Torah. And Rashi says, Siman Taryag. It's a sign of the 613 mitzvahs. And so what they interpret it and say, even though what Jacob was saying to Esau is, even though I've been living with Laban this whole time, who's an idol worshiper, I've been sticking true to the mitzvahs of the Torah that our father taught us. And even though Esau's not interested in keeping the mitzvahs himself, he respected his father Isaac, who that's what he taught him, and so he decides not to kill him. And they make up. Okay, it's one interpretation. But, so they said, well, what mitzvahs was he doing? And a rabbi was explaining, he had all these children, but he spent all of his time studying Torah. And he would sit in a tent and study Torah. And some guy said to the rabbi, excuse me, if he had 12 children, he wasn't just studying Torah. That's the joke. Okay, that's the joke. All right. Now that we have all the background, we can focus on what I wanted to get to. So, if you've been keeping score at home, you know how many children there are in terms of boys? 12, right? I mean, total. 12 tribes, right? 12. These are the 12 tribes. Rachel hasn't born any yet. She's going to have 2. But if you've been keeping score at home, all the others have now been born. How many to each of the other 3 wives? 6 to Leah, 2 to Bilhah, 2 to Zilpah, and 0 so far to Rachel. So if you can do that kind of math in your head, 10 born so far, 2 more to come. Plus Dinah on the female side. The Midrash says that there were actually all of them had twin sisters. And that's who they ended up marrying each other's twin sisters and so forth. You can take that or leave it. That's Midrash. But now that the other 10 are born, and we finish with Dinah, now the stage is cleared for Rachel. Okay? So now, Judy, if we begin verse 22, we get into the Rachel as a mother narrative. And here, everything changes. Now we have a whole new way of looking at the world. Okay.
Now God remembered Rachel. So did Jacob, it looks like. God heeded her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. So she named him Joseph, which is to say, may the Lord add another son for me. After Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, give me leave to go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go. For well you know what services I have rendered you. But
Okay. What just happened? What just happened? Did you see that? What happened? Joseph was born, but what did that symbolize? The end of the diaspora. He stayed another 7 years and ended up working nearly 21 years for Laban. He could have said, look what he says. Look what Jacob says. In verse 25, Rachel's born. And it was when Rachel had given birth to Joseph, immediately Jacob says, I'm out of here. Grant me leave that I may go to my place in my land. Why didn't he just leave after he married Rachel? This shows he could have left whenever he wanted. The contract was over. But yet he stayed. Another 6 years as his servant, basically, making Laban a fortune, making a lot of money himself as well. Joseph's born, I'm out of here. He said, work another 7 years for me. The Torah specifically says it passed as if it was very quickly because he was so excited to marry Rachel. But he worked 7 years, married Leah, worked 7 years, married Rachel, according to the Torah. You can go back and see. There is a verse that says it went by very quickly because he was excited about it. But here now, let's see. Okay, so my point is, what is it about the birth of Joseph that Jacob was waiting for in order to go back to the land of Israel? Okay, so if you look at Rashi, Ken, would you mind reading the Rashi on the first page? This is Rashi on verse 25.
When Rachel had borne Joseph, after the birth of him who was to become Esau's adversary, as it is said, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. Fire, Jacob, that has no flame, Joseph has no effect at a distance. Therefore, when Joseph was born, Jacob put his trust in the Holy One, blessed be he, and wished to return home.
Okay, so there's something about, according to Ovadia, who is a prophet, is one of the books of the Bible, and the Midrash, but Jacob understood that there was still a great threat to him back in Israel. Esau, waiting to kill him. He knows that. There's something about Joseph that is the antidote to Esau. There's something about Joseph that protects him from Esau. Okay, that's answer one. Answer two, the Kli Yakar, a different perspective. Would you mind reading that one too? The reason?
Kli Yakar. The reason for the thing that Jacob did not ask for was that after Joseph was born, Jacob was doubtful whether the 12 tribes would come from him or not, as in Damasik.
Yeah, that got messed up. There is no Genesis 68. Don't look for it. It doesn't go that far. I'm not sure what that is. Sorry about that.
Jacob said, if the stones are joined together, I know that I will establish 12 tribes. He heard from Mina that he was doubtful whether the 12 tribes would come from him. And when Rachel said in the prophecy, Joseph, may God have mercy on me, and did not ask for many sons, because the Spirit of God spoke to her that 12 tribes would come from Jacob and no more. Therefore Jacob said, send me now.
Okay, so basically what the Kli Yakar is saying is the prophecy is there's going to be 12 tribes. If there's going to be 12 tribes, we've now had 11. If I go back now, now's the soonest I can go back. He can't kill me. Because if he kills me, the prophecy won't come true, because there's meant to be one more. And since the prophecy's correct, there's going to be 12. He can't kill me because Benjamin hasn't been born yet. So now I can go back and I can get there, and then Benjamin can be born, and based on that, Esau won't kill me. So he was waiting till he had 11, then he could go back, he'd be there, find safety, and then have number 12. Again, you can take it or leave it, but that's what the Kli Yakar says. One more text on this, the Radak. Rabbi David Kimchi lived a little bit after Maimonides. On the bottom. Ken, one more. Ken, you're on a roll.
Yaakov told Laban that now that all of his wives and handmaids had borne children, including Rachel, who had been barren, there was no further reason for him to detain Yaakov. There is an Agadic commentary quoted by Rashi, according to which now that Joseph had been born, Yaakov was reassured about the fear of Esau being able to harm him. He considered Joseph the antidote to such a danger. He had been told in a prophetic vision that the descendants of Esau would fall victim to the descendants of Joseph, and this is why he was prepared to go back now to his father's house.
Okay, so another prophecy that eventually it's the house of Joseph that's going to overcome the house of Esau. Now, if you're a JEPD person, if you're one of those people who believes that the Torah was written later, all of this makes a lot more sense to you. Because all of these prophecies are what happened. Because if you look forward to the rest of the books of Kings, and you see the different battles that are going on, and you know how prominent the tribe of Joseph is in the wars that are going to happen later, then you say, yeah, of course, we need Joseph. because Joseph is later going to go to battle. And so you can't go to Israel and fight Esau without Joseph. And so, you could say, yeah, of course the people who wrote the Torah wrote this because they knew what was going to happen later. Or you can say, no, I believe in the Torah, it's a prophecy, and what happened later is because that was the prophecy. However you want to look at it, it's what ultimately happened. So what do I mean by that? So just a little bit of Jewish history. So ultimately we know that Moses dies and Joshua leads the Jewish people into the land of Israel. And when Joshua gets there, he apportions different parts of the land of Israel to the different tribes. And the different tribes get their different sections, as it was ordained by God, if you believe in that kind of thing. Okay. I happen to, but, who knows. Okay. So Joshua says, you, tribe of Dan, you go here, and these places are still called that. The region of Tel Aviv, if you go to Israel, the bus line all over the country is called Eged. But if you're in Tel Aviv, they have their own bus line called Dan. Why? Because that's the area that was called Gush Dan, the block of Dan. That's the section that Dan was given. And it extends up into the north, but that was their area. So, these places are still called by the names that they were given by the tribe. Naphtali was given the Sea of Galilee. So they were in charge of all the fish. If you wanted fish, you had to know someone in Naphtali, or else you had to eat meat or fruit or, whatever. Okay. So everyone gets their portions. However, by the time King Solomon comes to power, they're all united into one kingdom, right? But King Solomon's son, Rehoboam, is rough on the people. Another guy named Jeroboam, no relation, but similar names, they break off, and the kingdom splits into two. The north is called Israel, the south is called Judah. Okay, now, in the south, you only had 3 tribes. The south was mostly desert. The tribes that were in the south, now there are 13 tribes. I'll explain that in a second. The tribes in the south are Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay? The tribes in the north are everyone else. However, they're now not 9 in the north, because if you can do this kind of math in your head, if there's 12 tribes and 3 are in the south, that leaves 9. However, the tribe of Joseph split into 2. Split into Ephraim and Manasseh. Who was the dominant tribe of the northern 10? Ephraim. Who were the 2 most dominant brothers? Judah and Joseph. Judah in the south, Ephraim in the north. And the kings of the south all came from, not including Saul, but after Saul, they all came from King David, which is Judah. In the north, they came from Ephraim, meaning they came from Joseph. And so the rivalry between the splitting of the kingdoms was the rivalry between Judah and Joseph, who were the 2 main leaders of the brothers. Clear so far? So there's this rivalry between Judah and Joseph. But Joseph is going to play a major role in what happens to the kingdom of Israel. So the fact that you can't go back to Israel until Joseph is born is meaningful. It's meaningful in a way because you could have said, who cares about Joseph? All the kings are going to come from Judah. Judah's already been born. Let's go back. But the Torah here is saying not necessarily, because eventually the kingdom's going to split in 2, and there's going to be another tribe that the kings come from, and that's Joseph. And that's what makes Joseph so important to the future of the leadership of the Jewish people. There's something here going on with that. Okay? We don't know what yet. I'm just pointing that out. John? Okay. Okay. And he recognized that Joseph was the one coming from Rebecca. Now he had to get serious. Coming from Rachel. Coming from Rachel, thank you. Coming from Rachel, and now he had to get serious. Yes. And you can't seriously raise the Okay. Oh, very nice. So for those at home, made the point, because he didn't have the mic, made the point that there's another reason, which could be that Joseph needs to be raised in Israel for two reasons. One, Rachel's the favorite, and now we're going to learn that Joseph is the favorite. And so which is problematic, right? And makes Joseph's life complicated. Makes his dress code complicated. It makes his the fact that Joseph is the favorite does not earn him much reward from the other brothers. In fact, they sell him into slavery and entertain the thought of killing him. Why is it that Joseph is the favorite and not Judah? What is it that's different about Joseph than the other brothers? We're going to get to that. But that's an interesting point. Okay, so a little bit of history. If you go on to the next page of the sheets, some actual history from 2 Kings, 2 Kings chapter 17. Now, the northern kingdom splits off. Just to give you a time frame, I'd write it on the board, but I don't write on Shabbat. I prefer to text. I've used that before. Okay. So, just to give you an idea, King David lives 1,000 years before zero. Okay? Clear so far? 1,000 BCE. He is king for 40 years, which means that in 960, King Solomon takes over. King Solomon is also king for 40 years. 40 is very significant for a variety of reasons. So King Solomon is king from 960 to 920. In that period, the first temple is built. The first temple commonwealth lasts until 586 when the Babylonians come and destroy it. However, during the first temple commonwealth, about in the middle of it, in the year 723 BCE, the Assyrians, under a king named Sennacherib, come and conquer the northern kingdom. And those 10 tribes are lost. That's the 10 lost tribes. Okay, so there's 3 left, because remember now there's 13. So you still have Levi, Judah, and Benjamin. By the way, Benjamin was tiny and gets rolled into Judah. So now, after 723, up until 723, we were called the Israelites. We were Bnei Israel. We were the children of Israel. But after 723, the only Jews who are left are Jews from a place called Judah, which is when they started calling us Jews. That's why we're called Jews, because we're the people from Judah, right? Which is, if you ever heard Bibi Netanyahu in his glory years, before he became prime minister, when he was really just a spokesman for Israel, and he would say things like, the West Bank area is called Judea. Yeah, we're from there. That area is called Judea. So, okay, there's a great skit about I don't know if you saw it, but it's just an amazing idea that we killed Jesus, but we weren't there. The Jews were never there. So how did we kill Jesus? It's kind of funny. If you can see the logic, it was someone else killed him, but the Jews hired him. Where were the Jews? New Jersey. Okay, whatever. It's a whole skit on Israeli TV. It's very funny. We were there. So in 723, when the 10 lost tribes get lost, what the Assyrians used to do is they would move people around so that you'd lose your loyalty to land, and it worked. So they took those Jews and they moved them to other places. They took other people who weren't Jewish and moved them into northern Israel. And so you wouldn't have an allegiance to the land that you lived in. Stalin did, I think, similar kinds of things, moving people around, whatever. Not that I know much about that. But that's what the Assyrians did. So how do we know that? If you look at what happens in 2 Kings here, it says, and the Assyrian king ascended throughout the land, and he ascended to Shomron, which is the other part of, we say Judea and Samaria. Judea is Yehuda. Shomron is Samaria. Shomron sounds, you don't have to be an expert in Hebrew to know that Shomron sounds Jewish, right? And besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the Assyrian, who was the prophet at the time, the Assyrian king conquered Shomron and exiled Israel, meaning the northern kingdom, to Assyria, and he settled them in all these other places. And so now Jews are living to all those other places. They assimilate totally into Assyrian culture, never to be heard of again until we find some of them in Ethiopia. And they come back. Okay? And other than that, they're gone. We've lost them. Okay. Now, later in the books of prophets, we hear about ultimately what's going to happen when they come back. Because, you know, in the Messianic era, the idea is that all the 12 tribes are going to be reunited. So, listen, here's what's going to happen. We're all going to go to Israel. We charter a flight. Right. You know, there's a custom of being buried if you're in the east, being buried with your coffin facing towards Israel. Because when we have bodily resurrection, you're going to get up and take your first steps towards Jerusalem, which I have in my will, bury me facing the airport. Right. So, because, you know, my knees are killing me now. I'm only 49. Imagine after being dead for, 600 years, your knees are going to be killing you. Why take the extra step? Okay, so Zechariah is now talking about if we're going to be reunited in the times of the Messiah, and we're all from Judah, which means to say that most likely every single one of us your ancestors were either from the tribe of Judah or Benjamin. Unless your last name is Levi, or Cohen, or some derivative of Leibowitz, Levkov, Levi, whatever, then you're from the tribe of Levi. But you were living in the south because that's where the temple was and that's where your business was. So that's all that's left. So us Judahites are going to be reunited with the Israelites. But we don't know who they are. So look what Zechariah is one of the prophets. If you want to know what's going to happen in the days of Zechariah, in the days of the Messiah, read through Zechariah or Zechariah. We read from some of Zechariah at weddings. You know, we go, Kol sason, v'kol simcha, kol chatan, v'kol kala. So, someday in the streets of Jerusalem, the voice of bride and groom will be, he talks about what's going to happen in the Mashiach. You're going to hear the voice of the bride and the groom in the streets of Jerusalem, and old men are going to sit on benches. It's already happening. So if you're ever walking in Jerusalem, you see a couple old guys sitting on a bench, go up to them and say, This is what we've been singing Mashiach. You didn't go to Chabad Day School, but I had to sing Mashiach, Mashiach every morning, and all my teachers had bumper stickers that said, hang in there, Mashiach is coming. So, I got these guys and I say, this is what I had to, all right, doesn't matter. Here's what Ibn Ezra says about it. This portion continues from before, his sword upon his arm, telling when this would happen and where. Now it explains that it will be when Yisrael returns to Jerusalem with Mashiach ben Yosef. This prophecy is about Yisrael. Now, when we say Yisrael, and you see Yisrael here twice, cross that out, and what that really means is the northern kingdom that was lost, and the 10 tribes were lost. So if I read it that way, what Zechariah is saying is it explains this will be when the 10 lost tribes return to Israel. And look at this concept with Mashiach ben Yosef. Now, I don't know if what you know about the Messiah. Okay. So, the Messiah is supposed to come on a donkey being led by Eliyahu, who's going to be a descendant of King David. Mashiach ben Yehuda. David's from the tribe of Yehuda, from Judah. Ibn Ezra is telling us, no, there's two Mashiachs. There's two Messiahs. There's Messiah ben David, Mashiach ben David, and there's also Mashiach ben Yosef. So there's two Messiahs. And the paradigm for going to Israel, for the return of the Mashiach, is to go with both Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. And what Jacob is creating in the paradigm is saying, yeah, I know Judah's been born, but I can't go back to Israel until part 2 of the Mashiach is coming, until Mashiach ben Yosef is coming. And there's not going to be a Mashiach ben Yosef if there's no Yosef, which means you can't go back to Israel until both Mashiachs are present. And that was Jacob's view. Okay. This is a great question to ask in a Reform Rabbinic school. Okay, so the question was, where does Jacob get these prophecies from? Okay, so in an Orthodox Rabbinic school, you say, Yaakov's a Navi! Yaakov's a prophet, and then they would either throw a hanger at you or a stapler or whatever the teacher had. That's Orthodox. That's how I grew up. Or the teacher would pick you up and throw you into the wall, which happened many times. 98% of the time was deserved by the student, either for saying something really stupid or just whatever. This is my childhood. It's not your problem. Okay. In a Reform Rabbinic school, the professors who study Wissenschaft des Judentums, the scientific study of Judaism, would say, prophecy is where we have a problem because we can't explain it. And there's no way to... Prophecy and miracles, when you're studying the Torah scientifically, is impossible to deal with. And so you have to basically say, either it was just a figment of his imagination, or it's something that he thought, or it's something that he came up with, or, if you want to believe it, that God told it to him. But I think we understand that these guys were prophets and that they spoke to God. Now, we know, the Torah tells us at the very end, we know this from the Torah. I mean, you could say, well, I don't believe the Torah, but the Torah is telling us this. So, we know from the end of the Torah that it says Moses was the only prophet who spoke to God face to face, and that all of the other prophets spoke to God through visions and dreams. So he must have had some sort of dream where he heard this. But if not, if you don't buy into that, you have a very tough time saying, why the heck did he stick around for another 6-7 years? And why was it that Joseph's born and the very next verse, I'm out of here? Okay, so the rabbis are trying to deal with that. But when you look, even if you are, so what they would tell you in a Reform Rabbinic school is, of course they need Joseph. Look how the rest of history plays out. Joseph is going to become the father of the northern kingdom. And so going back to Israel now means that we can set up Israel because Joseph is now born and needs to be raised in Israel because he is Israel. So, yes. Yeah, exactly. You could explain it only to a point. Right. Okay. A couple more. One more text source here, and then I want to show you how this relates to modern Zionism and what just happened, because I think you'll find this fascinating. So the Vilna Gaon said, Because Judah and Ephraim are the heads of tribes everywhere. By the way, when you see Ephraim, read Joseph, because Ephraim is the son of Joseph. Because Judah and Joseph really are the heads of the tribes everywhere, in order of the flags, and they were the first kings. And they're, meaning Joseph's descendants were the first kings of the north, and Judah's kings were the first kings of the south. We don't count Saul. That one didn't work out. But we start with the prime king, who's David, and all the kings of the south after David came from Judah. And therefore, in the future, may it come speedily, Mashiach ben David, meaning Mashiach ben Judah, and Mashiach ben Yosef, meaning Mashiach, the son of Joseph, will be the redeemers and leaders. Therefore, the Jewish nation is called Judah and Ephraim. And therefore, they also took first in the division of the land. Okay, now, in the 1700s, mid to late 1700s, there were a few rabbis who were starting to give birth to the idea of Zionism. Herzl was not the first. Herzl was the first one who could sell it and really spread it around to the Jewish communities of the world. But there were some Orthodox rabbis. A couple of them actually made Aliyah, including my favorite one, the Or HaChaim, who in 1748 made Aliyah from Morocco and spent the last couple of years in Jerusalem. He's buried on the Mount of Olives, and his synagogue still is there in the old city of Jerusalem. But there was another one in the 1740s, 1748, I think he was born. I forget exactly. Something around that time. Named Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer. And he wrote many articles that he eventually collated into a book called Drishat Zion, in which he said that we need to start settling the land of Israel. And we need to start moving back there. As an Orthodox rabbi, which is a very bizarre thing to say. But here's what he said. He will first make Judah a harvest for you, preparing for you a settled land. And then the ingathering will be great, and afterward, without a doubt, Mashiach ben Yosef will arrive and reign in Jerusalem. Okay, forget about the rest of it. Meaning, who comes first? Mashiach ben Yehuda, or Mashiach ben David, or Mashiach ben Yosef? Mashiach ben, who comes first? Yeah, look at it again. David is Judah, right? King David comes from Judah. He will first make Judah a harvest for you, preparing for you a settled land. Meaning that Judah is going to come first in the age of the Messiah and till the soil. And build kibbutzes. Right? Start preparing the infrastructure. Once the infrastructure is built, then Mashiach ben Yosef can come. Clear so far? Okay. Now, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, who's basically the founder of modern Zionism, modern religious Zionism, who are his disciples today? Who are his most notable disciples today that came out of the yeshiva that he father, but was ordained by Rav Kook? But Naftali Bennett, Itamar Ben Gvir, Ritzalel Smotrich. These guys studied in the yeshiva that's based on his ideology. It's in Chadera. If you don't think that his words of religious Zionism are affecting what's going on in Israel today, you're not paying attention. All these guys came out of the same yeshiva in Chadera that was founded by the people who basically founded what's called today religious Zionism. These are people who came out of the school of Rav Kook. Rav Kook would probably think they're all nuts. Not Naftali Bennett. He'd probably think the other guys are nuts. But this is the ideology that it came from that's called religious Zionism. So Rav Kook in 5664, which I believe is 1904, wrote a eulogy that was given in Jerusalem. The eulogy was not for any individual person, but it was. If you know who it is, don't say it. But this is a eulogy that was given for someone anonymously. And when you hear who it is, it's pretty unbelievable. Okay, you ready? So let's take a look. So Rav Kook wrote, Annabelle, would you mind reading the eulogy by Rav Kook? It goes on to the next page.
Yeah. Just as God created in a person the body and the soul, and parallel to them the forces which serve to strengthen the existence of the body in its form, to strengthen and develop it, and the forces which strengthen the spiritual soul and strengthen it. And the height of perfection is to have a strong and properly developed body and a healthy, strong, and developed soul, drawing after it with its mighty force all of the strong forces of the body to serve the good and pure mind, the divine will in his world. So God prepared in Israel specifically these two forces. The force which is parallel to the human body, desiring good of the nation in its position and material strengthening, which is the proper foundation for all of the greater and holy traits with which Israel is identified, to be a holy nation for Hashem, God of Israel, and to be one nation in the land, a light for the nations. And the second side, the force of strengthening spirituality itself.
Okay, now this is great. Let me explain. This is going to be fun, I hope. It's fun for me. So, what Rav Kook is saying is this. There's the body and there's the soul. Okay. Now, the body has to do things physically. Someone has to drain the swamps. Someone has to build the kibbutzes. Someone has to put up the electrical lines so that we can call each other. Someone has to build the hospitals. Someone has to have an army to protect us. If we're going to have, he's a religious Zionist. But before Rav Kook, the overwhelming majority of the Orthodox world was not Zionist. There were some, there were a few. There was Rabbi Kalisher, there were a few. But the overwhelming majority said, what are you talking about? There can't be Zionist. You can't go back to Israel until God picks us up and brings the third temple. The Talmud says that, what don't you get? And a lot of the other Orthodox Jews who lived in Israel at the time, who were there, were anti-Zionist. They've been there forever. A lot of them, their descendants are still in Mea Shearim. They're still anti-Zionist, and they hated Rav Kook. However, Rav Kook still rose up and eventually became the chief rabbi of Mandatory Palestine, British Mandatory Palestine, which essentially means he was the first chief Ashkenazic rabbi of Israel. So he says, listen, there's a body and the soul. Jacob knew that. And Jacob knew that King David would be the one from his line, King Solomon, his son, to build the temple. They were going to be the builders. King David was a warrior. King David was a fighter. King David was the army. In fact, that's one of the reasons he couldn't build the holy temples, because there's so much blood on his hands. There was also the thing with Bathsheba, but that's whatever. So for those reasons. But King Solomon, who was the man of peace, Solomon in Hebrew is Shlomo, Shalom, man of peace, he'll build the temple. Fine, he built the temple. They paved the way. That's Judah. But Jacob's favorite was not Judah. Jacob's favorite was not the one who built what we call gashmiut, how do you say it in English? The physical. Yeah, well that wasn't Jacob's favorite. Jacob's favorite was Joseph. Jacob represents the body. I'm sorry, David represents the body. Joseph represents the soul. So what did Rav Kook realize? That there's two messianic comings of Mashiach. First comes Mashiach ben David. Second comes Mashiach ben Yosef, which means that someone has to come and build the country and start the infrastructure, and only then will the Messiah, Mashiach ben Yosef, come and bring the spiritual. Who is this a eulogy for? Theodore Herzl. This was Theodore Herzl died in 1904. This was for Rav Kook. Listen closely. For Rav Kook, Herzl was Mashiach ben David. Herzl was the non-religious builder of the country. And what he was praying for was, someday, Mashiach will come, Mashiach ben Yosef. And what Jacob said is, we're not going back to Israel until we have both. And now that Joseph's born, I can bring all of them. I don't need all 12 tribes to be born. Benjamin still hasn't been born yet. It doesn't have to be all 12 tribes. I need Judah and I need Joseph. I've got Judah, now I got Joseph, now we can go back. Because the paradigm that he's setting up is, you can't have the complete nation of Israel until we have Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef in place. So today, what we have in the state of Israel, we have Mashiach ben David, which means we only have Judea. Mashiach ben Yosef will come when we figure out who was Israel. Who were the 10 tribes that were lost? How are they going to come and join? Because the Mashiach can only come when all of the 10 lost tribes are together. So I think this is a plea for Jewish unity, but I also think it's setting the scene to make the case that Rav Kook was later able to make. Because Jacob went back only after Joseph came, there are 2 Mashiachs. The rabbis understood that. That's why we have Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. But what it also says is, anyone who thought Zionism was wrong is wrong. The body has to go back and build the country before the soul can ultimately descend and complete what Israel is. That's why we're home free in the land of Israel. But what do we say at the end of Pesach? We're already there. You want to go to Jerusalem? You could be there in 12 hours. Drive to the airport right now. Tell them, book me on the next flight. There's probably a flight tonight at 12:55. You can go. But even if you go and you stay in Jerusalem till Pesach, at the end of your Seder, even if you're sitting at the Kotel, you're still going to say, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year, the Mashiach ben Yosef shall come and complete the dream, and we'll finally have the completion of what Jacob was hoping for in this week's Torah portion. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.